Welcome back and welcome to our live panel discussion on demystifying different framework approaches to encourage collaboration and drive efficiency. My name is Peter Yates and I'm the Vice Chair of the National Association of Construction Frameworks and Regional Director for the Constructing West Midlands Framework. In the next 45 minutes, we're going to discuss the varied approaches across the UK to tendering and delivering projects collaboratively in a framework, whether frameworks create a boom and bust culture, and how frameworks can help improve the behaviours and outcomes and create greater certainty of pipeline for the supply chain. So without further ado, I'd like to call upon our panellists to introduce themselves, please. Noreen.
Hello, my name's Noreen Winhall and I'm the Director of the Buildings Pillar within Crown Commercial Services. I'm also on the Executive Board and the SRO for Carbon Net Zero and PFI across CCS. Within my pillar, I look after three category areas: construction, workplace and energy. And within construction, we have four frameworks: construction works and associated services, construction professional services, building materials and modular. Thanks, Peter.
And Tanya, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Tanya Silva and I am the manager of the North Wales Construction Partnership. It is one of the three local authority-driven construction frameworks in Wales. So a bit of myself, I am an industrial engineer and I started my career on working in the private sector in Siemens Industrial Solutions and then in Siemens Medical in various roles. But importantly, I have done a lot of management of improvement, concentrating in areas such as partnership and collaborative working. Currently, I work for the 6 North Wales authorities, based with the Hampshire County Council, that is the lead authority for the framework. The framework delivers, as I mentioned before, major construction projects and anything above £350,000 over 5 lots. It runs up to June 2023 and does not include civils or housing. Thank you.
Thanks. And Lisa, please.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Lisa Bliss. I manage the London Construction Programme, which is a virtual organisation hosted by the London Borough of Haringey Council. Within the programme, we have a major works framework that kind of supports all procurements for public sector within London and the home counties for procurements above £1 million, ranging up to sort of 20, 50 million, whatever the threshold may be. We also have our minor works dynamic purchasing system and our professional services dynamic purchasing system as well.
Thanks, Lisa. Kingsley.
Hello, I'm Kingsley Clark. I'm an operations lead for Southern Construction Framework. I predominantly head up the southwest part of the framework and we cover all of the southern geography. SCF initially and predominantly as a construction framework, focusing on work £2 million plus, but we also have a consultant offering and soon to have a residential offering to sit alongside our construction offering. Thank you, Peter.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kingsley. And last but by no means least, Robert.
Good afternoon. I'm Robert Stone, Technical Director at Homes England, responsible for frameworks. As you expect, we've got a number of frameworks. Our key one is our delivery partner framework, and we've just replaced that with a DPS. We don't have our own construction framework. We subscribe to the CCS Construction Works framework, and like many others, I've worked in the private sector as well as public, and I've bid for a lot of public sector contracts. So I have good experience on either side of the fence. Looking forward to the discussion this afternoon.
Brilliant. Thanks all. So Noreen, the first question to you, if I may, please. With something like 7,500 frameworks in operation in the UK at the moment, and the desire to secure potentially lucrative pipelines over a number of years, we're told that contractors often find it hard to recover their bidding costs. How do we mitigate against loss leader bids at the framework tender stage, and how do we ensure that future performance, quality and safety isn't compromised through recouping bidding costs? How do we stop the initial framework tender stage becoming a race to the bottom in cost terms?
Thanks, Peter. I think that's a great question. I totally recognise that bid costs are really high. So I think the first thing we have to really do is try and reduce the bid costs within the first instance. There's probably a number of ways that we can do this. One of the things that we can do is to look at reducing the number of award questions across the bid and include generic questions that are applicable to all lots, for example. And this then really starts to avoid duplication across the bidding process. And it will also help reduce the initial bidding burden on the suppliers and make the tender process easier as well to evaluate, being totally honest. I think also as framework providers, we can consider at the SQ stage, making sure that we align the selection questions to the common assessment standards as well, which is obviously building on PAS 91. And this will make sure that the SQ process is fairly simple to follow, and it will use commonly used metrics that are readily available in industry as well. And I also think that during the framework procurement stage, a consideration has to be made on what's the appropriate number of suppliers that are awarded a place on the agreement as well. I think as a framework authority, it's important that we have a really rich picture and understanding of the pipeline of opportunity to this, because this will make sure that we ensure that there's sufficient work relative to the number of places that are available and that are going to be awarded. But we also obviously have to factor in supplier capacity and contractors that ultimately might not bid for work as well. So I think with the right number of suppliers, you can then build the right relationships to deliver a pipeline of activity that could deliver the best outcomes. I think lotting structure is another thing that we should be considering as well. If you are setting up a lotting structure that's based on contract values, and if you then consider how you limit the number of lots suppliers can actually bid for, hopefully you will actually end up with suppliers that are most suited to delivering that value of work within that lotting structure, competing against each other. And it gives suppliers the best chance of winning work and starting to recoup bid costs that way as well. And then I think something I'm hoping you'll hear a lot today from all of our panellists, early contractor engagement is so important. You know, we talk about input into the pre-tender process. It's so critical, both for us as the contracting authority and for the bidders. I know we run facilitated planning sessions ahead of our any frameworks that are going out, and this really helps to influence how we build those procurements, but also gives bidders an opportunity to really understand what that pipeline of activity is going to look like and is it right for their organisation in the first place. So I think certainly from a hints and tips perspective, that's the types of things that we should be doing as contracting authorities for frameworks to consider.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Noreen. And I've just hand it over to the panel, if I may. Does anyone like to come back on with a follow-up on that in respect of, I suppose, just stopping the race to the bottom at bid stage? If not, I'm happy to move on. Yeah, so Kingsley, I mean, I'm building on what Noreen has said there. I certainly recognise the kind of involvement of contractors in making a collaborative exercise, that it's not kind of us just prescribing a framework to industry. It's actually getting them to help and be a part of that process, recognising certainly, so for some of the regional communities, it's about community engagement and, you know, SMEs and making sure that there's that regional participation. I mean, a question for you, if I may, recognising yours is a regional framework, albeit, you know, a sizable one. Could, or indeed should, frameworks be more forward in terms of bidders securing a place, and for the, you know, should it be more straightforward in terms of the onward operation and access to work?
It's a very good question. Thanks, Peter. I think I'm going to be somewhat controversial in saying possibly they shouldn't be much simpler to get on. If we look at a framework such as ourselves and many of the other people that are on the call, we've been operating for over 12 years. We've had a fairly steady pipeline of north of £600 million a year. Contractors want to be on the framework. It is competitive to get on. We have more applications than we have places, and the only way to really make sure that we pick the true best contractors for our framework is to have challenging quality questions and is to really push the boundaries of what we can ask. That being said, totally respecting what Noreen was saying about making sure that we're not duplicating. So the PAS 91s, yes, that's a really good mark to have. So we don't want to create unnecessary work just for the sake of getting it. And I suppose adding to the bureaucracy of getting onto a framework. That's not what it's about. But making it easy to get on, I don't think is the right thing. And certainly we sell the benefits of the framework of having gone through a really robust selection process with our main contractors. And by doing that, we're able to make the onward selection and the whittling down to pick your preferred bidder a much simpler, quicker process, because a lot of the hard work has been done in terms of securing price on the framework itself.
Brilliant, thanks, Kingsley. And I might come back to and reflect on some of those. We're starting to get questions come in from our audience as well, so I'll endeavour to stitch those in as we go along. I'm going to move, if I may, over to Tanya, and if you like, there's a different scale of frameworks being represented today, and I know, Tanya, your framework, you're very focused in terms of your local communities and what you do. So I'm going to ask a question, if I may. How do contractors differentiate between frameworks and the framework tenders they pursue? And what are the key drivers for those, I suppose, central and local government, the public sector-driven frameworks, that sets them apart from the many, I suppose, much more commercial frameworks that are in operation?
Thank you, Peter. That's a really good question. Public sector-driven frameworks are not commercial entities and are set up to meet the regional and national priorities of the areas that they serve. For example, ourselves, we don't charge a fee. Our framework is funded by a pot that the different authorities that are involved in the framework put together, and they can tap into it without a charge. And it's open to all the public sector organizations in the region. For us, the drivers are not just about delivering successful buildings, but to create long-term partnerships with our stakeholders in order to deliver wider benefits to our communities. So communities being the important word. And as an example, we do a lot on community benefits and social value. We align everything we do to the future generations acting wells. An objective of this act is to create resilient communities. It includes support to SMEs, education, transport, employment, environment, you name it. It's about our communities and about making them resilient. So everything we do is in order to meet with the act. For us, partnerships are based on trust, and we invest great efforts to develop this among all stakeholders within the framework. Over the years, we have moved from traditional delivery into early contractor involvement, as we are aware that expertise is required early in the process, and a different type of relationship is needed in the modern construction. We also have moved the emphasis on price and have more of an emphasis on quality. So, for example, the majority of our projects are 70% quality and above. And within that quality percentage, we do up to 20% on community benefits and social value for our communities. We have a number of drivers, like all of the frameworks present today in this call, but for us, supporting our localities, it is important. It's our main priority. Also implementing Welsh government initiatives and UK government initiatives and policies. But definitely the direction of travel is towards an intelligent client, is towards trying to lead rather than let ourselves be led, if you like, and that's what we have been trying. So just talking about the priorities and some of the drivers, we have zero carbon, ISO 19650, construction playbook, ethical employment, the Future Generations Act, fair payment, you name it. We have a large number of priorities that we have to meet when we set up a framework. So to answer your question, Peter, in short, because I have been going on, contractors need to consider whether our regions and the way our frameworks operate fits within their organization priorities. And that's how they should be selecting whether they bid or don't bid for our contractors. For us, having a contractor that is not bidding for our work doesn't help us. So we want you to be really committed to be part of the framework. Also, as a framework, we are not in the business of making money. We are on the business of creating thriving communities. I think that's all for me. Thank you.
No, that's brilliant. I mean, sorry, just before I move on, I'm going to just, if I may, just to run in one of our audience questions, and that's around the question's been asked around social value and quality, diversity, inclusion scoring, the criteria on appearing more on frameworks. I mean, dare I say, we've been running frameworks for 18, coming on 19 years now. We've always included that. The question that was asked is, at what point these scores making a difference between winning and losing work? I mean, just reflecting, Tanya, on what you've done there, just very briefly, if you would. What's the kind of emphasis that you put on that in respect of the framework there in Wales?
For us, it's very important, and we have done a lot of work with our stakeholders, internally with our clients, moving the main priority of the delivery of a project from just the building to how we impact positively our communities. So as I mentioned before, up to 20% of the total value of the score can be on community benefits, social value, and the drivers are really strong. We, as local authorities, live and for our communities. And I think what we have decided is that that's the way we are going to be operating, and those are our main priority drivers. So we are taking it, delivering a building as a given. Any contractor present today should be able to deliver a successful project. But what else can you deliver? What is the value for money that you are giving us? And we want to see that impact in our communities.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tanya. And sorry, I'm not excluding Robert and Lisa. I've got questions lined up for you, but just on this particular theme, given that there's an interest here from the audience. Kingsley, I know, just having looked at your iteration of frameworks recently, I mean, you mentioned earlier about sort of ensuring that you get sort of high quality bids, and that not deliberately low barring it just to remove bureaucracy. How do you feel that sort of social value and, if you like, what some might describe as the softer aspects of frameworks are represented, and if you like, either a barrier to entry or a requirement for entry?
Yeah, I think it certainly is now becoming very clear that it's expected of bidders and contractors to deliver EDI throughout their bids and throughout projects. And it definitely is making a difference between winning and losing opportunities. The frameworks have to strike a balance. All of us on the call are multi-provider frameworks, i.e. we have clients that come from different areas. So we have to strike the balance in asking the right questions at framework formation. That means we've got contractors that can go on to deliver client-specific EDI requirements without making it so specific that we're only going to appeal to a single type of client, because ultimately it's in the mutual interest of a framework and its contractors to appeal to a broad range of client base. That's quite important to us all. So yeah, the two bits I would say is definitely we, in our latest iteration of the framework, the residential framework, which we are in the process of launching, social value was at the heart of a lot of the questions that we asked, but it was more around a flexibility of approach. And then during mini competition and the onward selection, we kind of enhanced that further. I suppose the one bit that I would probably say where we wrestle with the most is there is a fairly big split in the industry and client base at the moment as to whether or not to monetize social value. So we choose not to do it at framework tender, but to leave the option there for clients to monetize it in a way that they deem appropriate as they move on. But that's our approach to it, and I'm sure others will have a different one.
And again, just before I come to Robert, and I've got hopefully a good question for you, Robert. Noreen, do you mind if I bring you in, please, if you like, from the central government perspective on that value? Because respecting as well what you guys do is at kind of national level, whereas I think we're regional operators. There's a different focus on sort of communities and what I suppose social value means on our doorstep. How do you approach that?
Well, I think I would echo everything that we've just heard from our other panelists there around the importance of it. And I think what Kingsley's just said around it can make a difference in terms of winning places on frameworks, but also then securing contracts through call-off processes. The one thing I just wanted to add in, obviously, is we've now had the introduction of PPN 06 as well, which went live from the start of this year. And one of the things that we do have to do is work with our suppliers to understand and help them understand the implications of PPN 06, particularly in a central government perspective, because there is a requirement now under that PPN to look at the social value model and how that's implemented within the call-off process. So there actually is now starting to build guidance and models out there, and there is more information that's available that whilst it is applied to central government, it also can be applied into wider public sector as well and local authorities. So I just would point people to some of that information that's also available.
That's brilliant, thanks. And Robert, I'm going to capitalise on the fact that you're kind of our poacher turned gamekeeper, having come from private sector into public sector, and you've got kind of quite a varied and interesting background there. But I suppose as much as anything as well, that you're slightly different from the panelists in respect of your kind of client hat that you're wearing there as well. So yeah. I'm going to ask you a straight question: how important are frameworks to Homes England? And how can for our audience members, how can the public sector be a better client?
Yeah, well, I'd start by saying frameworks absolutely, very important. We can't deliver our work without a good quality frameworks in place. Clearly, they make it quicker, easier. We can get directly to a pre-selected a number of suppliers, and they will help us deliver our program activity. So I think we couldn't do without them. But I think we've got to think about it's a process, it's a mechanism, it's the start, isn't it? And for us, actually, the key outcome is to deliver against what government wants us, to provide in the housing sector. So we've got to have a focus on that, and the framework is definitely one of the key elements to delivering on our objectives. I think, just echoing some of the comments around quality as well, it's definitely not about price for us. Our DPS doesn't even ask anything about price in order to get selected on the DPS delivery schemes. We have the normal quality and pace, and actually certainty is something key for us. But the other things are the policy drivers that we need to deliver on, modern construction, areas around affordable housing, design quality. And just picking up on the EDI point, is that we have Building for a Healthy Life. It encompasses sort of 10 key criteria for new communities, and includes health and wellbeing and diversity inclusion. So we use that as our marker as part of the selection process to take people forward for an actual project. And then in terms of being a good client, I think we definitely need to be a better client. If we can't just expect the framework partners to do everything. We need to improve ourselves as well. And I think aspects of that are program and project management. We need to get better at that. I think key is communication. We put out a big pipeline, but clearly everyone wants to know the granular detail there when a project's coming forward, the scopes of things, so they can put it in their business plans. And I definitely get that from when I was on the private sector, is that you want to know when stuff is coming, you can factor it into your resource planning and your business plans as a business. And then I think we need to do this on lessons learned. So we're very good placing the contract, getting on with the work. Where's the lessons learned? Where's the absolute including those lessons in new projects so we can continuously improve. So frameworks, absolutely, very important. But I think that's part of the process, and I think we really want to focus on outcomes, and then get our partners to recognise, understand our aims and outcomes, and then have those as a focus for the project. I think, a bit like Tanya said, we expect everyone to be able to deliver something. What we want is that extra added value about them understanding our business, and then bringing those additional value add to the work they do for us.
Thanks, Robert. And if I may, I'm going to just pull one of the questions we've been asked by the audience, because I think it really touches on the point you make about sort of, I suppose, private sector's view of the way we manage and the way we kind of structure our frameworks, in particular, our approach to continuous improvement, or the approach commonly taken, and lessons learned. And the question sort of sits around, I suppose, if you like, that commercial tension. The question asks, can real innovation and improvement be generated and shared across framework contractors and clients whilst protecting commercial interests? So if you like, the commercial tension between contractors on a framework or stakeholders, and can that really be realised for the benefit of all? What's your thoughts on that, Robert?
Again, I've got a good perspective on this, I think, from the private sector, because, in a bidding situation, you come forward with a good idea, a bit of innovation, and what you want is that to stay with you and give you the advantage in winning the work, rather than it being shared against all the other bidders. But clearly, sat on the public side, I want to take advantage of all the good ideas that come forward. It is really difficult as a public sector client, because you want to be fair to people, and I think it's a maturity thing as well. Is that we have lots of rules and regulations and processes and guidance, and it's the people who are actually running the tender selections is about the maturity of those in dealing with those aspects. I can't give a right or wrong answer, but clearly, we want to get all the best from all of the bidders, but it is definitely a difficult situation. I can appreciate where private sector comes from on that. I'm not sure whether that's a full answer, but
no, I think that's a very fair answer. I'm going to move on to Lisa, if I may, and just to kind of I suppose follow the thread of the commercial interest and the commercial tension. Lisa, I think you'll probably recognise this as a fellow regional framework lead. On the perennial request from contractors, supply chain, to gain greater visibility of future work pipelines, how can contractors and their supply chain work with us and support frameworks to generate throughput and improve that certainty? What's your reflection on sort of pipeline for starters, and what could we do to sort of improve on that?
I think this is a burning question, and I think it's the question that is probably on the tip of every contractor's tongue and every framework manager's tongue, into how do we, as framework managers, obtain meaningful pipeline information that we can provide to our contractors. It's certainly a question that we receive all the time, and something that we are really, really keen to try and broker that partnership approach between ourselves, clients, and the contractors. And I've heard it's mentioned so many times about the importance of having that partnership approach. But I'm not going to lie. I mean, certainly for myself and for the London Construction Programme, obtaining that kind of pipeline information in a time that means that we can be getting it out to our contractors is very challenging. I heard people say sometimes this is maybe not going to be the answer that everybody wants to hear. It might be a little bit more controversial than some of the responses that we've heard on the chat today. But certainly what I see is that there is a reluctance from some of our members to kind of share the early pipeline, because they think that is a commitment up front, that they're going to be choosing your framework and it's going to be coming out on that particular framework. And maybe at that point in time, and that early, they may be looking at options, because let's be honest, lots of our contractors are sitting on multiple frameworks. And so, and our clients are looking at, okay, what's the best framework to choose for this particular procurement? So actually being able to obtain that information from a pipeline perspective and give that to our contractors, certainly from the LCP, has been a really kind of a real challenge for us. I mean, one of the things is we want to have a robust relationship with all of our contractors. That goes without saying. but also the development with our relationships with our clients is just as important, making sure that they, are coming to us so that they can see the value that our framework can provide, and that by having that early engagement with the contractors on our framework, it might make them more confident in being able to come to the market in a more timely manner. But, for me, Keith, and I know that we have certainly spoken about this numerous times, it is really, really challenging.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Lisa. And if I may just pick up on your reference there to sort of developing relationships. And sorry, I'm picking on you guys now. So, Kingsley, would you respond in respect of how you guys develop relationships? I mean, we understand there's that kind of commercial tension. We understand from local central government perspective, we can't always cite a pipeline. We don't always know it ourselves. So how do you then, within the framework, help to kind of break the boundaries of that kind of commercial, I suppose, competition between contractors and get them working for the benefit of, if you like, the greater good for the framework? And how do you really push innovation, through your framework?
Yeah, so we've basically set up within the framework a number of work streams where we will meet with contractors on specific topics on a regular basis, and it is really difficult, as you've kind of alluded to, Peter, to create the culture within those. That this isn't around individual commerciality. This is about selling the benefits of our collective wisdom in order to appeal to more clients and therefore to make the framework more successful. So I think there's a couple of things that we do which I think helps us achieve that. And the first is to make sure that there is most certainly a level playing field by all of the contractors. Now, I know we will all strive for it, and I would say, Jess, on this call, we all achieve that with our kind of contractors, but it's making sure the contractors really buy into that and know that actually if they sell the framework, they're in for a fair shout. It's not going to end up with one particular provider or whatever. Once we've created that, then it's about getting the right people from the business together. So, for example, we have a health and safety forum, which looks at lots of kind of the innovation in health, safety and well-being. And at that forum, we don't have any commercial people present. This is all around the health and safety professionals of an organisation, and getting the right people there that have that common goal. Because whilst the health and safety professionals, clearly they have a paymaster, they're going to be included within that contractor for that reason. Ultimately, their primary focus is the health, safety and well-being of their workforce. So by taking that approach and by going down that route, we've managed to be pretty successful in making those special interest groups work really well. And I suppose some of the successes, the Health and Safety Forum has worked to roll out Clocks, which is a cycling logistics initiative outside of London. That was something that we really worked hard with. Carbon, we have one, and we've developed tools around that. I'm trying not to turn this into a sales pitch, but effectively we're working with them in order to produce something that can go on to sell the benefit of the framework, but still allows all of our contractors to go above and beyond, and still allow them the ability to differentiate themselves in particular areas. And I think if you can create that culture, then yeah, absolutely, frameworks are one to help with that.
Brilliant, thanks, Kingsley. And Noreen, if I may pick on you again from sort of giving this sort of central government perspective on this, how do you keep frameworks fresh when you've gone through that exercise to procure it? Contractors have answered, pulled in their very best teams to put in the very best answers down. How do you make sure that going forward it sort of doesn't just stop at the framework tender stage? That you've got that there is genuine continuous improvement, and that you can be truly said to be innovating. What's your approach in CCS?
Well, one of the things that we've adopted is the FAC1 Framework Alliancing approach, and what that means is that the relationship that we have with our supply chain partners actually continues on throughout the duration of the life of the framework, and that's where we see that as the best opportunity and platform for us to bring our supply chain partners together to come and have those conversations around how do we drive innovation and collaboration. I know Lisa also touched on pipeline being one of the biggest challenges. I totally recognise that as well. And we recognise the importance of being able to shape and share that pipeline of activity as we get access to it. And obviously, from a central government perspective, we do tie into the policy teams. So one of the things that's going to come out from April next year is a requirement for all central government bodies and arm's length bodies to publish detailed pipelines of activity, procurement activity, which will really start to help in this space, so that we can actually start to understand what that pipeline looks like, where are the areas that we really need to innovate, and how do we then engage with the suppliers to really talk about how do we meet the challenges that we know that are coming down the line, whether that is carbon net zero and climate resilience, or whether that's dealing with PFIs or social value or modern slavery. And that richness of that view of pipeline is critical to that.
Brilliant, thanks, Noreen. I mean, I'm just reflecting again. The majority of our audience being sort of from the contractor side of things, if you like, and we're sort of sat here on the clients and the framework lead side of things. Robert, if I may bring you in, how do we make this meaningful for contractors? Either put your with your client hat on again, sort of reflecting on how we we work with them, so that we're not just kind of prescribing a set route. That actually means it makes a difference to their approach and their delivery.
Yeah. And when you asked me that earlier question about innovation, I was thinking very sort of specifically about the sort of commercial delivery aspects. But one thing we did during lockdown, which actually we're continuing now, is we've held lots of sort of open forums with our framework partners on subject areas, diversity, sustainability, and we started a sort of lunchtime learn and brought in taken offers from our contracting framework partners to come in and do a teach-in on something for an hour over lunch. And actually, the issues that we targeted are issues that are important to us all. So everyone, actually, it's a benefit to everyone to listen to what people are doing around trying to get to net zero, around making their team more diverse, and actually everyone has a benefit in that. So we see that as sharing best practice more than sharing top secret information. This is stuff that we should all be doing, and if we can all do better and learn from each other, then that's better for the sector. Building safety as well, of course, which is really a top priority. And then finally, I'd just say is, I suppose Homes England slightly different than other government departments insofar as we have that sort of one foot in the private sector. So we often join industry task forces and industry groups as an observer, and then able to feed in policy ideas and objectives and other things that are important to government into those forums. And I know they're not strictly in the frameworks, but a lot of the same faces clearly around the table on industry groups as are on the key frameworks.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Robert. I mean, again, I'm going to go back to you, if I may, Tanya, and just sort of bring you in, if you like, as with your very regional focus in the North Wales framework. How do you draw the kind of the attention? How do you work with your contractors to make sure it's meaningful to them through your framework?
I think it is about having safe spaces to talk, to be open for transparency. And it's what I mentioned before, the development of trust between amongst stakeholders is important. It's something that we work and put a lot of effort on. So also during COVID, and as you are well aware, the market is quite flooded with work. And we are struggling with tenders and etc. because it's really busy out there. So we are doing pre-tender engagement. So basically, every time a project is due to go out, we meet with that lot, contractors, clients, discuss it. When is the best time to put it out to tender for everyone to prepare a bid? So have those early discussions. What are our priorities, the constraints, how we have a better outcome, and so basically doing a lot more work of continuous communication and collaboration and working through partnership. But as I said, it's creating those safe forums to talk openly and to and trust each other to say what we perceive is going right or is not going right, and having that those tools to try and improve and sharing best practice. So from our local perspective, the local authorities have been really working closely with us. trying to manage the pipeline, manage their projects. At the end of the day, it's on their benefit to have good bids. So we do a lot about that. We did before, but it definitely during COVID and after COVID, there is more and more emphasis on that.
And I'm just going to, you've created a great opener for me, may I say, Tanya, in respect of your reference to sort of best practice. And that's, I suppose, just actually, sorry, Lisa, if I can just bring you in on that one, on the innovation. I've just seen you pinged up a note in respect of how LCP deals with.
It was one of the things that where I've listened to colleagues speaking, and I think it's a really, really important part. But what I hear from my contractors is the importance of having early engagement with our members, so they can kind of talk to them about the particular procurement routes that they may be thinking about, whether it's a single stage, a two-stage, and actually kind of being able to be part of the process, doing that sort of market testing, the response to EOIs, and having that early engagement with our membership to kind of inform the way their thought process is and how they're going to be structuring that procurement process has been really, really key in terms of the way we've been trying to add some value from a contractor's perspective, to be able to kind of link them in with the right people in the right organisations in the procurement functions to have that kind of early dialogue. And I think that has been crucial especially over the period of COVID, where everybody's been working remotely. Maybe the relationships that they once had weren't really there. So we've been able to bridge that gap between our contractors and putting them in touch with the right people at the right time to make sure that they can inform and help our procurement colleagues to structure the procurements in the right way that's going to get the better outcomes for their the projects that they're going to be delivering. So I think that's been a real key factor for us in London.
Thanks, Lisa. And I suppose just again, I mean, reflecting on best practice and discussion on procurements, and we've only got a few minutes left, colleagues. But I mean, it's been a great session. I suppose reflecting on some of the recently published industry and government initiatives. I mean, the Construction Playbook described frameworks as an efficient method for government to procure public works and provide an opportunity for contracting authorities to access economies of scale. However, using frameworks inappropriately can have negative consequences and can unintentionally inflate prices. Cabinet Office, as colleagues will be aware, they went on to say that across public and private sectors, there are a wide variety of frameworks and a lack of clear guidance as to the preferred structure and best practice features. As a result, the potential of frameworks is not always well expressed or well understood, and they're not always successful in delivering their aims. So colleagues, and I'm going to open this up to the floor, as it were, in light of the recently commissioned independent framework review led by Professor David Mosley, the Cabinet Office Minister Laura Agnew said that the review would result in a recommended gold standard structure for frameworks, specifically to help client bodies lead better procurement processes. And I suppose I know a number of colleagues have been involved in the interviews on these gold standards, but open question to the floor, if I may, and we've only got a couple of minutes left, but how confident are each of you that we can and will meet this future gold standard? Kingsley?
I don't think...
Yes.
Sorry.
Go on, Noreen, you go first. I'll follow you.
Just going to say really quickly, I think what I'm hearing today is that we're actually all moving in that direction. It's about how are we structuring our frameworks, how are we considering our lotting structures, how are we managing bid costs, how are we considering SMEs and social value. And I actually have a huge amount of confidence in all of our colleagues here and the work that we're doing in the way in which we want to move. So I think it's a great initiative, and I think it'll be great for the industry as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Noreen. Kingsley?
Very similar from me. I think, if I'm honest, I suspect those of us around the table today, we are not going to be too worried when the gold standard framework notifications come out, and I think we'll probably already be hitting those in a lot of ways. When the Construction Playbook came out, I felt it was a really good step in the right direction, but most of what was covered we were doing already, and I'm really proud to say we were doing it already. So for most of us, I hope it won't make a difference. We will continue to evolve, we'll continue to improve, but it won't be a show changer for us. And if we are deficient, I definitely will make sure SCF is pushing it to get there.
Brilliant. And just very, very briefly, Robert, with just seconds to go, from a client's perspective, what do you hope will come out on the gold standard?
Yeah, well, I echo the comments from colleagues on the call, and and agree that the construction playbook is an excellent document, and the guidance we will follow, and I'm sure it will be good guidance, echoing the sort of quality that we've talked about today.
That's brilliant. Thanks, colleagues. I mean, that's been a great discussion with some real insight today into how colleagues from across the public sector working collaboratively with industry to add what I'd say is meaningful value and drive best practice. So that all remains for me to say is thank you for joining this live panel discussion, and a big thank you for the panel members for their time today. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you all.
Thank you.